Hey now, this is Dean Robinson, SummitCityNoise.com. People, you're listening to the Dean Robinson Radio Show on Indiana Talks and TuneIn. So let's get back into it. Now, hopefully you understand that former Vice President Joe Biden bragging about how he would have beat up Donald Trump if they went to high school together. Well, people, that's an example of toxic masculinity. I mean, it is silly and it's stupid. It's a dumb thing to say. Joe Biden said it, and really just repeating it, because he talked before about taking Donald Trump behind the gymnasium and beating him up. But now just talking about, yeah, dude, if I went to high school, what if I went to high school with Donald Trump? I'd beat him up for disrespecting women. That's toxic masculinity, you know. And in this excellent essay by Eugene Scott, writing for the Washington Post, addressing this, going to the words of author and activist Ryan Douglas. Author and activist Ryan Douglas has called toxic masculinity a performance invented to reinforce it. Toxic masculinity is built on two fundamental pillars: sexual conquest and violence, qualities men regale as manly and virtuous, he wrote in the Huffington Post. How can we hope to stop violent sexual behavior if violence and sexuality are still considered primary virtues of manhood? Solid stuff. Too often we allow presentation of strength to overstep strength itself, which can and should be defined beyond the physical. When true strength is absent, a man overcompensates. That's what Joe Biden was doing. That's what Donald Trump did when he retaliated, talking about, well, if I did fight Joe Biden, he'd go down fast and hard. That's overcompensating. He should have just said, Joe Biden is too old to be talking about fighting someone, and he's too surrounded by Secret Service to fight anyone. Donald Trump, I'm too old to be fighting anyone. But Donald Trump is the same guy who said, after the Florida high school massacre, 17 people killed, Donald Trump said if he had been there, he would have rushed in to help. Okay? That is overcompensating. That is overcompensating, because when true strength is absent, a man overcompensates by showing everyone that no, really, truly, he's strong. Just look at how he's proving it. He's not smiling, he's flexing and punching things. He's growing facial hair and purposely deepening his voice. Okay? And so that's toxic masculinity, people, based on sexual conquest and violence. And so Donald Trump, my goodness, people, this sexual conquest stuff, it's getting him into a lot of trouble right now. A little bit of heat, except these Republicans who have decided we're in the Donald Trump business, we're in business with the Donald. Well, they don't care that his wife can't trust him. Now, to me, that's very telling. And it's odd with this situation with Donald Trump, you know, and obviously just cheating on his wife. And you're even going to have Meghan McCain, you know, recently on The View. So the ladies of The View are addressing this notion of Donald Trump supposedly facing 3 lawsuits regarding these affairs or these sexual advances that women don't want. 3 lawsuits going on now. A lot of other women accusing Donald Trump of this kind of stuff. Donald Trump says they're all a bunch of liars. But because he said that, well, that's why he's getting sued in a couple of these cases. You know, defamation of character, calling these mugs liars. These women, you know, but they're talking about it on The View. But Meghan McCain, you know, the right-winger on The View, she says, well, you know, this stuff is important, you know, but I'm of the mind that Donald Trump did cheat on his wives. I'm of the mind that he did, but what's the point of his getting to this? And so a couple of the ladies say, well, it might have to do with all this campaign finance stuff. Because if he's giving out hush money to these women, and that's from the campaign, oh my God, that could be criminal, you know? But Meghan McCain's just like, poo-poo. I know Donald Trump cheated on these women, I'm pretty sure of it. But we're talking about that where we could be talking about the war in Syria. I'm like, okay, Meghan, maybe you're about to drop some wisdom. And then the first thing she says is, well, we have to do something about Assad gassing the babies. I'm like, wow. And there's no proof that Assad has gassed anybody. Any of these reports that you've read about Assad is gassing his people, it's just barbaric. He's a barbar killing his own people. It's the Syrian civil war. And so in a civil war, it's citizen against citizen. So yes, Assad is killing his own people because some of his own people have decided they want to kill him, get rid of him. It's a civil war. It's not pretty. I don't think anybody in a civil war likes it, especially these refugees trying to get away from that junk. But the United States says, no, we're not going to help you. We're going to come over to Syria with these armies, and we're going to help the enemies of the Syrian government. And sometimes we're going to have to fight ISIS. You know, it's a mess over in Syria. We should be talking about Syria, but this notion of Assad dropping these chemical weapons on his people, I don't believe it. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. And Assad knows, well, if I use chemical weapons, the United States is going to use that for a reason to bomb us, to attack us. And you're going to have Russia saying, look, we are looking at possible false flag operations that the U.S. is going to pull to try to justify attacking Syria. You have Russia saying, United States, we're watching out for false flag attempts on your part to justify violence in Syria. I know what's going on in Syria. The United States funding all these terrorists. They've been doing it. The United States has been doing that since the Reagan era, funding rebels in the Middle East who then become terrorist groups. So you had the Mujahideen being helped by Ronald Reagan when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in the 80s. So Reagan helping, you know, these people throw off the Soviet invasion, but that's the Mujahideen with Osama bin Laden. Well, after the Mujahideen is successful throwing off the Soviets, well, there's no reason for the Mujahideen. That's why it splits off into al-Qaeda and the Taliban of Afghanistan. And so there's a lot we could be talking about, but we're not. But again, with the ladies of the View talking about Donald Trump's toxic masculinity, you know, these relationships with these women, some of them consensual, some of it him just harassing women. Meghan McCain says, well, yes, I believe he did it, so what? But my take on it is, if Melania Trump can't trust Donald Trump, why should Dean Robinson trust Donald Trump? If a man's own wife cannot trust him, why should anyone else? I mean, when you get married, I mean, you all these marriage vows, for better, for worse, you're going to be there for this person, all of it. There's supposed to be fidelity. Well, when there's a trust between a married couple, then it's busted. You can never trust that person again because you know they're a liar. And so if your wife can't trust you, why should I trust you? Why should a nation trust you? But Meghan McCain, so Republican, so conservative, so Christian, and she talks about it, but when it comes to President Donald Trump cheating on his wife, well, that's between him and Melania. You know, no talk of the sanctity of marriage then. But when it was Bill Clinton, you know, cheating on his wife, people back in the 90s, and that was a big deal. A lot of people keeping up with this Bill Clinton cheating on his wife stuff, you know, with Monica Lewinsky. My goodness, even now, David Letterman, former late night comedian, he felt bad. He said, look, all those jokes about Monica Lewinsky at her expense, making me rich, David Letterman, I feel bad about it now. But at the time, that stuff was everywhere. It was a big deal. And Bill Clinton did get impeached. You know, when you get impeached, it doesn't mean you're out. That basically means you've been indicted by Congress. So an impeachment is really an indictment. But then once they went through this impeachment stuff, well, we got nothing on you. You know? So, yeah, we threw that rotten peach at you, but you're able to clean it off. Bill Clinton, but that was a huge deal. Now, when Hillary Clinton's running for president, you have these right-wing, conservative, capitalist Christians talking about how Hillary Clinton hates women because when her husband was cheating on her, well, she just didn't believe any of those women and insulted some of them. And so let's vote for Donald Trump because Hillary hates women. It's absolutely outrageous. But now when we get to where we are with Trump, it's like Meghan McCain says, who cares? What's the big deal that Donald Trump's wife cannot trust him? You know, it's the darndest thing. And I remember when, you know, the Access Hollywood tape came out with Billy Bush and Donald Trump talking about grabbing by the pee. I can do whatever I want. I'm just attracted to beautiful. I can't control myself. Donald Trump goes on to be elected president. Billy Bush gets fired from NBC because of a tape from 10 years prior. So it's like, NBC, you didn't know? You've been sitting on that tape for 10 years and nobody knew anything except you knew to bring the tape out. And now you're going to fire the reporter for something that happened 10 years ago. It's completely madcap. But right now you got Billy Bush trying to do his comeback tour. You know, and he might stick, might not. Who really cares? I mean, how many Billy Bushes do we need out here? How many Kathy Griffins do we need out here? I mean, she's doing her comeback. I guess she sold out Carnegie Hall a couple hours. You know, she held the bloody Donald Trump head. That was so terrible, so awful. I mean, these right-wingers just going crazy, you know. But she's coming back, and it's like, what's the big deal? I didn't think it was a big deal at the time, you know. But you know, that's a long way around talking about this toxic masculinity. But I thought the Washington Post article was excellent. It was good stuff. And people, when we talk about masculinity or toxic masculinity, I think when you hear about toxic masculinity, it really gets these right-wingers panties in a bunch. You know, people like Tucker Carlson, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, and Pat Miller, Whoa AM. They can't stand somebody talking about toxic masculinity because it really sounds like women coming up with this. I mean, it doesn't sound like a man came up with the term toxic masculinity, although it could be. I mean, maybe Dr. Jackson Katz was talking about that because he talks a lot about, you know, masculinity and, you know, this male domination. Tough Guys is one of the videos that he did. I think he did an upgraded sequel, Tough Guys 2, worth watching. Tough Guys, Guise. You know, really talking about this mask of masculinity that guys put on that's not always worth wearing. I mean, heavy is the head that wears the tough guys. But this masculinity is typically, historically been defined by men. And so when you hear toxic masculinity, some men get scared of it. I'm not scared of it. I don't consider my masculinity toxic. Not worried about it. When we talk about toxic, well, we can talk about this notion of sexual conquest being so important for your own ego, your pride in yourself. You have to build it up by this sexual conquest, this penetration of another person, you know, and then violence. Now, it used to be in Roman and Greek society especially. These Greeks, and you know, their society, their customs and culture were stolen by these Romans. Okay, but these Greeks, oh my gosh, there's so many crazy stories about how men would treat boys in all these homosexual ways to build up their masculinity. I mean, I just don't want to go into it, but again, grown men would engage in homosexual activity with boys with the intention of masculating the boys, raising them up to be men. And so in ancient Greek society, homosexual behavior was a standard, a tenet of manliness, of masculinity. It's hard to understand that now because in America, homosexuality is so otherized. It's been so otherized. Now, you'll hear a lot now, these right-wingers, these conservative, capitalist, Christian Republicans, you know, they hate the LGBT agenda, and it's just being crammed down our throats. They're just jamming it down our throats, and they love using that phrase when talking about LGBT ideology or just whatever. I mean, you see, you know, a TV show that might have a gay character, you know, or a movie that might have, you know, some gay stuff in the plot, or just, you know, for lack of better ways to say this stuff, people, But you're going to have right-wingers saying, well, whenever there's an example of that, of a gay person on television or a gay character, that's LGBT issues being jammed down our throats. It's got to be this oral stuff, jammed, just forced. It's the craziest thing. But when you look at our society and you look at our entertainment, it's largely hetero. It's largely hetero, largely straight. So even when they talking about all this liberal Hollywood showing all this homosexuality, my goodness, that is a tiny subset of this Hollywood entertainment. LGBT friendly or LGBT specific entertainment, that is just a small percentage of the Hollywood fare that we see. Most of this Hollywood fare reinforces traditional gender roles between men and women. I mean, your Disney movies, my gosh, with this princess stuff, all this monarchy. Disney, with their cartoons, they love kings and queens and princes and princesses. And their corporate line is Disney's princesses. They have everything with these Disney's princesses. Whether it's gummy bears or gummy treats, fashions, dolls, everything, Disney princesses, because Disney loves traditional values. They love monarchy. Now, outside of Frozen, which people want to say, my gosh, that's got to be about lesbians, but it's just, well, they're kind of shifting the script away from all this, I got to get a guy to just fulfill myself, like The Little Mermaid, like Cinderella, like Sleeping Beauty, like all the Disney princesses before Frozen, before Elsa and whatnot. Most of this Disney stuff, pro-monarchy, pro-traditional gender roles. But it's largely men who get to decide this stuff. Because with Disney, well, they got the Disney princesses stuff rolling, with Walt Disney, kicking it off with all this Snow White. And then, it's all these years later, all the way up into, Little Mermaid, and then beyond. Just Disney princesses, but largely men dictating these gender roles and how people are going to play them. Now, it's going to be years ago, I think it was at Cinema Center, saw a very interesting movie, and I had to look it up. It's a movie called Stage Beauty. Came out in 2004, and it has Claire Danes and Billy Crudup in it. And I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's Billy Crudup or Crudup. It looks like Crudup, but it's Claire Danes. And so, I had to go to the Internet Movie Database to get some information about this movie, Stage Beauty, released in 2004, directed by Richard Eyre. And so, the brief synopsis is, a female theater dresser creates a stir and sparks a revolution in 17th century London theater by playing Desdemona in Othello. But what will become of the male actor she once worked for and eventually replaced? And so it's Claire Danes playing, this costumer who works for this actor, a man, but it's back then in 17th century London, the 1600s. Well, women were not allowed to portray women on stage. Men had to do that. So men playing women in these Shakespearean plays. So this actor, that portrayed by Billy Crudup, he's famous for playing Desdemona in Othello. And then you gotta love Othello. It's the story of the Moorish leader, the king. He's a black guy. But back then, usually played by a white guy in blackface. So I love it that it's Othello, with white guys playing black men and white men playing white women. It's an absolute trip. So let me go to the storyline here on IMDb, to really let you know what's going on in this movie, Stage Beauty. So this storyline, the description written by Jackson Booth Miller. So, Stage Beauty. Based in the 1660s of London's theaters, this film is about the rules of gender roles in theater production and means to change them for everyone's benefit. Ned Kynaston is the assumedly gay cross-dressing actor who has been playing female parts in plays for years, particularly Desdemona in Othello. He also has a close relationship with a member of the royal court, the Duke of Buckingham. So, this is 1660s England. So, it's about the rules of gender roles in 1660s England when women were not allowed to portray women on stage. Men had to do that. And so you have this Ned Canaston, famous for portraying women in these plays, particularly Desdemona and Othello. Ned Canaston, a man, has a close romantic relationship with the Duke of Buckingham, a man. Now, that's manliness in 1660s London. So all this homosexual behavior, it defines masculinity in London in the 1660s, okay? And so, stage beauty. One day, the rules of only men playing women could change when aspiring actress Maria auditions as Canaston's praised role, Desdemona. And so, Maria, portrayed by Claire Danes, a woman. Well, she wants to play a woman on stage, but women aren't allowed to do that, okay? So, the rules of only men playing women could change when aspiring actress Maria auditions as Canaston's praised role, Desdemona, and soon enough, King Charles II decides to make the law that all female roles should be played only by women. Now, people, you have to understand, well, nowadays, a woman playing a woman, that's just totally normal, right? You would think it's odd when a man plays a woman. So even when you see Tyler Perry playing Medea, well, at this time, we all accept it. Medea is a woman. Tyler Perry is a man portraying her. Medea is a woman in all these fictional narratives. Now, I was recently talking to someone who said, well, the first time I saw one of these Medea movies, I couldn't get it. I had a hard time understanding because here's this man dressed as a woman, and it's obviously a man dressed as a woman, but everybody's acting like it's a woman, and at the end of it, I guess he is a woman. I'm like, dude, that's hilarious. But in Boo 2, the sequel to Boo, A Medea Halloween, and Boo 2, funny movie, very loosely constructed, but funny. Well, this is addressed in the movie, this notion of Medea looking like a man. It's addressed in the movie by another character portrayed by Tyler Perry, and it's Tyler Perry playing the husband to Medea. It's like some Nutty Professor stuff, with Tyler Perry playing these multiple roles. So Tyler Perry is playing a version of himself, he's playing Medea, and then he's playing this old guy married to Medea, but he's talking about, yeah, you look like a dude, balls got in the way, all this stuff. It's hilarious, so they're addressing it. And so again, nowadays, a woman playing a woman, it's not strange. A man playing a woman, you get used to it. But it used to be this notion of Tyler Perry playing Medea, that's the only person who would have been able to play a Medea, or another man. And back in 1660s London, it would have been a white man putting on blackface, playing a black woman, playing Medea. Absolutely madcap. And so this movie, it focuses on Maria, the actress, and Ned, Ned Canaston, who suddenly finds himself out of work because now men can't play women, or women are going to be allowed to do it. It's an absolute trip. And so this movie, very well made. And then when I'm looking at the box office, it's like it made $776,000. That's the gross. This movie didn't even gross $1 million. So it must have been a big money loser because it looks great. And there's some great scenes of like this smaller theater where Maria is actually able to get on stage because these major theaters won't let her. But it's a change of the times. 17th century London, the 1600s, 1660s, when finally a woman can play a woman on stage. It's an absolute trip, but just letting you know that it is men who typically decide what these gender roles and how we'll play them. But that's that, people. I'm Dean Robinson, SummitCityNoise.com. I'll be right back.